So all the apparent exteriors were all interiors, and there isn't a single computer-generated image, including that last one. That's just a model of a city. And that the shot that we were talking about backstage, which is probably the most famous sequence, just sort of astounding and perversely complicated sequence that took 2 months to build. The set, the moving apartment on the railway car. 2 months to build that, and as Anderson, the director, pointed out, you know, most movies are knocked off in 2 months. You don't build one set for one of 50 scenes in 2 months. And I've seen this sort of vignette structure where you have recurring characters or ideas threading through it. That's something you see a lot in European stages, especially playwrights like Odin von Horvath, who aren't well known in this country. Peter Hanke, yeah, did a play called The Hour That We Knew Each Other, which is another like dozens and dozens of vignettes. It's very satisfying. You don't see it on film much, and I guess you need to have an eye this strong to pull it off.
But also, I think it takes a real calculation in terms of setting an emotional tone, which is to say, if there were too much expressiveness in the actors, you would get tired. But by having the actors play it so close to the vest, that kind of deadpan, and the voices do the work, and also having all these dream tricks. I mean, there's that opening shot with a guy on the sofa, and he hears a train, which you kind of realize plays into the moving apartment building. Everything that seems like it doesn't advance the story does advance the story. It's in some thematic way, it's all incredibly interconnected.
Except that we don't get a motorcycle, but other than that great old motorcycle song. But you're right, it's about trains and planes and motorcycles. There's this whole notion that they want to get the hell out of here, and there's no escape either. So yeah, there's that sense of you're going someplace, but even when they do get a chance to go in their moving apartment, they don't really know where they're going. So it is that sort of Samuel Beckett notion. And I forget who it was it Philip French? Somebody wrote a review saying it was also looked like sort of what a Hitchcock plot was rewritten by Samuel Beckett, was kind of the feel of this, that you just kind of, but anyway, but yeah, that notion of, you're right, about they do lead, some things lead into others, and others just sort of go off on their own, and you never know which are coming back, and that's some of the fascination, I think. Especially like the whole notion with the tuba guy, then the guy downstairs, and then you cut across the way to somebody else looking. You never know
that's like Rear Window.
Contiguous space. But they almost all have interior audiences in one way. There's so many people. The guy who pops out from behind a tree. There are people looking through windows. And I do want to just say one thing that women won't be able to appreciate, but in this great theater, if any men have been up in the washroom, there's a window above the urinals, and you have like 3 guys standing looking out a window, much like that one restaurant, like when the guy's looking out the restaurant window. So anyway, I invite everyone to please visit the washroom afterwards.
This film was destined to play here.
Michael,
So please wait for the conversations over before you go to the men's room, please.
One thing that amazed me was that when I watched the scenes, I never knew exactly when they were going to finish. It always caught me off guard, and as well as the jokes. So I guess that's part of what makes the movie work.
But also the way the 2 pieces of music at the very beginning, going from that song to basically that Preservation Hall jazz band type jazz, which brings to mind Woody Allen and Sleeper. I mean, all these associations that he pulls off so deftly. I mean, the fact is, a lot of the things that usually are used to sort of make us react emotionally are used to get laughs and also help us understand what it is he's trying to do with the film. I mean, what's incredible is I don't see movies in theaters more than once very often, but when I saw this in Toronto, and it's usually a pretty, how best to say it, disaffected audience.
Deadly.
Yes, I was going to say the Dance of the Living Dead, but that's another conversation. And after
Plus Canadian, yeah.
Yes.
No, I love that, but I kid the Canadian.
I'll give you his email address later. But after the moving apartment building sequence, the place burst into applause. I mean, you're aroused by it, and just to be in the hands of a complete filmmaker in that way. I mean, there's so much confidence in the filmmaking, in every aspect of it. You never see it. You realize 30 seconds in that you just might as well give into it.
I think the films that it gets compared to quite rightly, and probably most grandly in the comparisons, would be Jacques Tati's Playtime, and a little bit of Mon Oncle, I think, just in the interiors. But
The movement is basically, there's no, with Tati, there's so much about movement being used to advance the story, you know, those pratfalls, and that doesn't happen here. I mean, basically, it's like people are trapped not only in these tableaux, but in their bodies.
No, I know your point. I think I had a different response to Playtime. I find that film almost as suffocating as this one, but in a way that doesn't suffocate your experience of it. I mean, I find Playtime kind of haunting more than funny, I guess. And I find this, and also your point about the music, which I hadn't really thought about, made me look up something that Anderson said. He said that he's using this Dixieland sort of strain on the soundtrack because he says, as quote, "I am fascinated by the unsuspecting music that existed in the 1930s when Nazism emerged."
You think about that swastika on the table? Right.
Yeah.
Not the swastika on the table, but the SS that the guy's wearing on the T-shirt at the very beginning of the film.
But just one last Tati hook too is there's that moment when one of the sadder scenes when the guy does have his heart attack.
One of the sadder scenes?
Well, the others were morose, but they weren't sort of, you could laugh more at them. But yeah, the Tati thing is when that guy, they're just, he thinks maybe he's going to get a raise, the guy who's just had his head shaved and stuff, or maybe he's going to be in charge of something, and this guy, but they're really unhappy, and and he opens his water, and there's that like, really loud in the foreground. Yeah. That's the sort of Tati thing, yeah, where you sort of mix the sounds too loud and things too. So I think there are a lot of references to it.
Right. And Beckett does come up. I don't even know if it's apocryphal or not, but I think Beckett was walking down the street in Paris, beautiful April day, with a friend, and his friend says, "My God, it just makes you grateful to be alive." And Beckett said, "Well, I wouldn't go that far." But that's kind of the mordant streak of humor that we might relate to here. And I think Roger is... Anything? Oh.
Cough, cough. The year Anderson's previous film was here, he sent 2 actors. One of them stared at the audience and said not a single word. Do any of you know much about Anderson?
I met him at Cannes after the first film, and I asked him how he chose actors. And he said, I found he was somebody who wanted to operate in terms of mystique, and he just sort of smiled and said, "Well, you know when they're right for the job," which I thought was kind of perfect. I mean, people might over-explain, or even people trying to give too much of the game away. He just said, "You know when they're right for the job." Yeah, and then we just sort of stood there uncomfortably, not talking for 5 minutes.
It's got to be a really strange casting call. You just get all these pallid people in the hallway, or does he pick them off the streets? It's a really good question. And I just wonder, from an actor's point of view, it would have been nice for them to come. The notion of do they just do their little snippet and that's it? Do they have any idea what's the rest of the movie about? I mean, since it's these little vignettes, it'd be really fascinating to hear sort of what's the working mode